So for Halloween week, where better to come than a Grade 1 listed Jacobean house on the outskirts of Birmingham in Aston that has been voted the most haunted building in the whole of Birmingham. At times it's actually been voted the most haunted building in the whole of the UK. I couldn't think of a better place than to visit with you guys than Aston Hall and look at it. Now, if you are of a gentler disposition, this may not be the video for you, because some of the stories in Aston Hall are dark and the energy is dark. The energy speaks of oppression and evil doings, powerful men literally getting away with murder because of their connections. The high connections linked to this place are literally a king, King Charles I, friends with Sir Thomas Holt, the owner of this hall. And as I say his name, Sir Thomas Holt, goosebumps run all over me because he is one of the main characters in this tale. Sir Thomas Holt, of a legendary temper, he was thought of as dark and evil. He held grudges and he literally got away with murder, high connections helping him. He is one of the main reasons I think that there are so many ghost stories here in Aston Hall, and there he is on the wall of the Great Hall as soon as you enter, the dark controlling man himself, Sir Thomas Holt. I think he's the very worst of this building. So when me and my daughter arrived at Aston Hall, at that point we had no idea of the details of any haunting stories within the building. Our Google research had stretched as far as punching in 10 most haunted places in Birmingham. That's all we'd done. We were torn about this because when we visited Hagley Hall a few days previously, we'd gone in with no history at all apart from my personal gnosis of growing up with tales of the Blue Lady. I didn't even know whether it was a true tale held within the building itself. I'd followed the energetic pull back to the place. It was that had pulled me to Hagley Hall. This place was totally unrelated to my own personal gnosis and my own life. I had no energy pull here, but I really liked the idea of walking in cold again with no history of the stories and the hauntings within the place. However, when we arrived and realised how vast Aston Hall is, we did ask at the desk to give us pointers as to what activity there might be. The woman on the door said she wasn't part of that team, or the team weren't there that day, so we were still at a loss. We did then Google for ourselves before we stepped beyond the hall, main ghost stories at Aston Hall. Up came a picture of a staircase, which we will visit later, and the story of the White Lady, and a story of a little boy whose story we will hit later. It was only those two stories that we had any idea of within the hall, but there are more stories to come. So for absolute transparency, that's where we were for knowledge before we started walking around the hall. And so our walk round began, and the energy underneath the eyes of Thomas Holt upon the wall did feel really dark and heavy. I know energy can't be proved, but there it is. We walked past this amazing staircase, and the first room we entered was the great parlour. This would have been the main living room of the family, where they would have spent their evenings. There were portraits of Thomas and his first wife, Grace Bradbourne. They had at least 15 children between them, but many of them died young, with Grace dying before 1627, leaving Thomas at the age of 70 free to marry a woman 40 years younger than himself called Anne Littleton. He was probably seeking another male heir because he disinherited his eldest son Edward, and George's youngest son had died in battle. So from the great parlour we entered a side room which had some memorabilia of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert visiting the hall when they officially opened the hall and park in 1858. Now in this room the camera pauses because at this point me and my daughter were both hearing something. We were hearing a background hum that just didn't fit anywhere. We both checked that we were both hearing it. We racked it up as something that needed debunking, possibly music somewhere or a display somewhere that had a hum in it. So that went on our to debunk list. It amazes me that the staircase would have had not only King Charles I walking up it, but also Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. This staircase really is steeped in history. And I'm leaving some of the original audio up so you can hear the creaks of the floorboards that are part of the natural sounds of the house. So the great stairs literally go all the way up to the roof where Sir Thomas would entertain guests on the roof. They were created in stunning strap work with lions and griffins and rosettes carved in, and look at this history. Cannonball damage is still visible on the great stairs from December 1643, when the Civil War landed on the very doorstep of Aston Hall. It was attacked by parliamentarian supporters after Thomas Holt had identified himself as a friend of King Charles. Just incredible history here. It would seem that we couldn't go any higher up the great stairs here. I wonder whether this was the staircase that led to the roof terrace where Sir Thomas Holt would entertain guests. And again, I have to say that there was a change in the energy here. Both me and my daughter both stopped and felt it. Again, that could be debunked by the very limited knowledge we have of this hall, is that a lot of the paranormal activity is on the upper floors. We've known that in the little research we did before we walked around. So it could be that. So we turned around and coming back down the great stairs, we then entered this room. Look at this incredible room. One thing about Aston Hall are the ceilings and the architraves. They are so heavily carved and so detailed. This room was absolutely spectacular. Across there you can see the tower in the middle of the wall going up. Later I'll talk about that. The whole place just feels absolutely seeped in history. It's quite incredible. There are carvings in every direction you look, and for the spook factor there are little secret doors and little staircases that go up. This staircase we didn't even go up. It's a reason to come back, as well as to find the kitchens. We never found the kitchens when we were here, and one of the biggest ghost stories happens in the kitchen. We never found the kitchens to walk around, and that is definitely a reason to go back, because there is a regular ghost sighting of the old cook in the kitchens at Aston Hall, and that's for a very creepy and awful reason. Now, Sir Thomas had a legendary temper, but it was astounding that in 1606 he was actually accused of murder by his neighbour William Asquith of Birmingham, who made a report accusing Thomas Holt of murder, saying, and I quote, "Sir Thomas Holt took a cleaver to his cook with the same cleaver, and clave his head, that the one side thereof fell upon one of his shoulders, and the other side on the other shoulder." Yes, he was accused of splitting his cook's head in two with a cleaver in a fit of rage. So a wealthy Sir Thomas then sued his neighbour William Asquith for slander for making this report of murder. He won, but it was very quickly overturned. William Asquith was cleared of slander and not asked to pay Sir Thomas Holt any money for slander, but Sir Thomas was never charged with the murder. The logic was given that yes, although the cook's head had split in half, one half falling on one shoulder, the other half falling on the other shoulder, there was no evidence to say that this was murder or that anybody had intended anything bad to happen on purpose. It would seem that Sir Thomas Holt's high connections with the king, his wealth and his status could literally help him get away with murder. Sir Thomas was a very well connected man. Not only had he been knighted by his friend the king, but he'd also paid to become a baron, to have the red hand of Ulster added to his family crest. This dating back to pagan signs, a sign of a great warrior and of a baron. However, the story goes that for Thomas Holt, the red hand signified this murder, his hands constantly covered in blood. So back to our walk round of the hall, you meet us in the orange chamber here, which has its original 17th century plasterwork still on the ceiling, showing orange trees. It's just the most incredible room. Then next to that we have King Charles I's chamber, where the king slept on the 18th of October 1642. You can see a portrait of the king and the queen either side of the bed. This shows how highly connected Sir Thomas Holt really was. And also we see the wealth here on display, incredible ceilings, carved furniture, amazing silverware. It's just spectacular. Next door we walk back into the drawing room. On the wall, that's a portrait of King Charles I and his family. He really did have high connections. This mantelpiece as well is just incredible. Look at the intricacy there, and the ceiling again. Everywhere you turn in Aston Hall you can see the wealth, you can see the connections, you can see how a man with this sort of sway could get away quite literally with murder. I actually didn't like the vibe in this room, but I think it's as much to do with the fact I don't really like marble, and I thought the fireplace looked really spooky. So then moving forward, at the entrance of which hung these amazing portraits, we came upon probably the most impressive room in the whole of Aston Hall. This is the Long Gallery. Now, the Long Gallery was a must-have feature for the Elizabethan and Jacobean ages. It was a multi-purpose space, a grand status symbol, a place to hang portraits of ancestors and kings and queens, but also a place to exercise in bad weather. Now, this Long Gallery is the least altered room in the whole of Aston Hall. It's also where we managed to debunk that strange humming noise, because within the Long Gallery at the moment there is a music exhibition, a piece of modern music designed for the Long Gallery, humming out through these speakers. This was our first major debunking of the day. I'll let you listen to that, as well as the natural sounds of the wood within this Long Gallery. I think it's important to work out what the natural sounds in a building actually are when you're doing a paranormal walkthrough like this. That's what we're in. So while I'm in the Long Gallery, let me tell you about the Green Lady. The Green Lady ghost is rumoured to be a former housekeeper named Mrs. Walker, who served till 1645. She's often sighted in the Great Hall or in the housekeeper's living quarters, sometimes sitting in chairs or wandering around the galleries and the Long Gallery, wearing a long, elegant green dress with a high collar. She's reported as disappearing upon noticing that she's been seen. So, a great debunking there. We are really pushing our debunking skills on these tours around these old buildings. But after leaving this room, we're about to come onto a landing where both of us stopped simultaneously and threw each other a look. Both of us felt the energy change once we stepped out here. It might be apprehension that we know we're going possibly up to higher floors, but then again perhaps not. But we felt the energy shift here, and both said the same thing at the same time. Let me put normal volume back on the video so you can hear the sounds on this staircase. Just one strange sound that doesn't fit as the energy changes. Listen again. Strange noises didn't stop as we entered the red chamber, and at this point we didn't know that we were at the bottom of the key staircase for main activity. But then another sound. I don't know whether you can hear it. This is where I wish I had better sound isolating equipment. It sounded like a quiet, breathy noise as we stepped inside, which didn't repeat as we stood still and listened for it again. And then as we left the red chamber and turned the stairs, we suddenly realised where we were. The picture of the stairs that we'd googled on arriving at the hall, the site of the most activity in the hall, and two rather awful stories to share. So at the top of the oak staircase we're about to enter the servants' quarters. So this is not only the place where the Green Lady ghost, Mrs. Walker, is often seen, but also the famous Grey Lady. The Grey Lady was the daughter of Sir Thomas Holt, who is said to particularly haunt the upper floors because this is where she was kept captive. In her life she had refused her father's choice of suitor as she'd fallen in love with another man of lowly status. Outraged, Thomas locked her in the upstairs attic space after learning of her plans to elope. She was told that she would be released only if she forgot the nonsense and did as she was told, but she never did, and she remained in this tiny attic space locked up for 16 years until her death. Some accounts say that she died of a broken heart, going insane and starving to death. Others say that she tried to escape and fell down the stairs and died. Again, her ghost is reported as being sighted at least twice a year by guests who often approach her thinking that she's staff dressed in period dress, but upon speaking to her, she disappears. Certainly walking up this upper landing staircase to the tiny little steps up to that attic prison room, the energy is very, very heavy. This the gate to the bottom of the steps up to the prison room where she was kept. How horrendous to have been trapped there for 16 years until you went mad and died. But the stories don't stop there, for this is the attic room, which is also called Dick's garret. Now, Dick was a small servant boy that worked here that was caught stealing bread in the kitchens. Sir Thomas was away at the time, so they locked him in the attic room awaiting Sir Thomas's return, but Sir Thomas's temper was legendary, and in fear Dick decided to hang himself instead. His ghost has been reported sighted in here and unfortunately hanging from the rafters in here from where he died. With strange unexplained tapping that sounded like rain even though it was a clear day, and with the atmosphere so thick, I decided to sit down on this windowsill right by that prison door and the attic room to start pulling cards. But I wasn't long into pulling cards when we heard one really loud unexplainable noise. So with my daughter right next to me, because she was filming the tarot reading, we heard one single loud footstep, the noise that this wooden floor makes when somebody walks on it, but a single one. There is a door at the end of this room that a member of staff could have come into, but it was just one single footstep. So we went back to investigate if the wood made creaking noises. We stood still, and when we weren't moving there was no noise at all. I think realising the sound of footsteps on this floor in the attic room, it makes this sound even more extraordinary. So with one unexplained loud noise that sounded incredibly like a footstep that we couldn't debunk, but knowing that this is an old house, I carried on with the tarot reading. Here are the cards as I pull them. So with so many different sightings on this landing, I first start with the question, who is here? And I pull this Ace of Pentacles. Now on this card is represented an earth goddess, here depicted as an Eve type figure with a snake and the keyword reward, which links this card to money and its meaning of monetary gain. Do we have here Mary Holt, the grey lady trapped in the attic space I was sitting across from, her fate tied to the reward of the monetary gain of the correct marriage, just like this figure looks tied to the pentacle. I asked for clarification and pulled as close to a grey lady as I think this deck offers up, a lady in white demanding justice for wrongs done. Mary was with us for sure. The second question I asked was, what do you need? And I pulled the Judgment card, Mary telling us today that she needs to be set free, to be released, to be allowed to go to her new life, to rebirth. This is the plea of the trapped or the imprisoned, the stuck, if ever I'd seen it. Are you still trapped, I asked, or are you finding happiness somehow? For this question, the Eight of Pentacles with the keyword learning came out, and I heard a voice as clear as day in my head say, I'm learning to be happy. The book says this card is about learning through new understanding, learning through new hope, learning through enlightenment and female power surrounding you. And this made me wonder whether the other female apparition within the building, the Green Lady, the old housekeeper, Mrs. Walker, whether she had come back to support Mary. It just made me wonder why the Green Lady had returned in spirit. Perhaps this was female power giving each other support. The next question I asked was, what do you want known? And I pulled firstly the Six of Swords. I felt very strongly with this card that Mary was telling the story that she fought back. She didn't stay static, but she tried to escape. The Six of Swords is a journey card from stormy to calmer waters. Was she telling us that this is what she was attempting to do? This is the version of her story that is truth. I can't imagine a woman with the bravery and stubbornness to defy a man like Thomas Holt would have sat passive for 16 years. I sense there was more than one escape attempt. Then another card, the Five of Swords this time, again with the keyword defeat, submission to be trapped. However, the swords down the tree mirrored for me the steep steps I was looking at from the attic room opposite. 5 swords, 5 escape attempts. This was no weak woman giving up. This was the story that she wanted telling. And finally, the bottom of the card deck, the underlying energy that covers this whole story. And look at this imagery and the keyword defense. Mary was trapped, yes, But with dagger in hand, the prisoner in this card screams Mary's story hard and clear. She never gave up. She fought to the very end. So, with the greatest of respect to the spirits that I've encountered and their stories, I try and tell the words that they want known through what I feel is a magical tool of tarot. Yes, not a scientifically provable ghost hunting tool, but I'm not about ghost hunting. I want to be more about meeting souls and telling their story. And what a story this was, the story of Mary Holt, the Grey Lady of Aston Hall, fighting for her passage out of a 16-year imprisonment from her father. So after pulling these cards, we head away from the attic room, away from that steep staircase from that prison room of the attic, and we go back down the oak staircase to visit the rooms that we have yet to walk through. And look at this oak staircase, isn't it absolutely incredible? The staircase twists down and down, and I can only imagine what it must be like to actually witness the apparitions that are said to be seen walking these floors. We come to now the very next room after the landing, and I have to say I am floored, because after pulling this card, the Six of Swords, what did Mary want us to know? With the keyword passage, the very next room is called the passage room. I feel chills. Is this as far as Mary got? She fell down those stairs, and perhaps this was her final resting place, perhaps in an attempt for freedom. The passage room is as far as she got. That key word and the name of this room, it just floors me. I've never heard of a passage room before. And so in a house full of the darkest of family tales, in stark contrast to pictures on the wall, we head out back down this incredible history-soaked staircase, and Mary's story that she told through the cards is still reverberating around my mind, and yet there feels like a peace when I feel like I have landed on correct interpretations. It's like a stillness in me, and I could feel that stillness as we walked through these final rooms and back out, away from the very dark and heavy energy of Aston Hall, back out into the daylight. We had a little wander around the grounds and stopped at the stables for lunch. I have to say, this is quite a setting for lunch with my fellow ghost hunter, my amazing daughter. So thanks guys so much for watching today, for listening to the stories of the souls held within this hall. I hope you enjoyed that, and join me again next time. Bye.